Shane Foster here, your product specialist with Team Wendy. Today, I'm excited to take you on a virtual tour of what it would be like on a live helmet shoot with Team Wendy, to see our technology, to see our performance, and all together for you to make an educated decision on what is the best purchase for you or your agency. All right, so before we get into this, let's talk about rules of engagement. Anytime there is a live shoot, you gotta understand it's not to collect perfect data. It's really to instill confidence in you, the end user, and those that are looking to potentially buy one of the Team Wendy products. So with that, things can go wrong. Things may not be perfect. The shot may not be perfect. We're not going to cut that shot out. There may be splicing that happens with me because I'm certainly imperfect, but when it comes to the shoot, from the time the trigger is pulled to the projectile striking the helmet, that will be uncut. We're gonna show you what happens to the helmet. With that uncut footage, we're gonna show you what happens inside of that helmet. That way, when you're traveling out there and you see a trade show and someone's saying, this is what happens, we want you to know what factually takes place when one of our helmets is struck by either a 9mm, a 40 caliber, 357, and a multiplicity of other rounds that we're going today to shoot our helmets with. All right, so I wanna walk you through a brief history of Team Wendy. 1997, a young lady by the name of Wendy Moore sustains a traumatic brain injury. Her father, Dan Moore, while she was in the hospital, designed a material that was called Zorbium, which is what we're known for today. Unfortunately, Wendy succumbed to her injuries, but that started the mission of who we are and what we're all about. Until 2014, we entered into the Ballistic line with the X-Fill, and then around 2019 and 20, that company was acquired by Avon Protection. So we took Avon Protection with Team Wendy and also introduced Ceradyne technology, and those three companies together is what created the dynamic trio that we have today, which is, as you know, Team Wendy. So let's talk about something we all know a little bit about, or we think we do, and that is backface deformation. That is simply the indentation inside of a helmet once it's struck by a projectile. Now, what is the standard? Well, according to medical professionals right now, currently, 25.4 millimeters is the standard. Well, if you don't speak metric, what does that mean? 1 inch. Anything beyond 1 inch is considered detrimental. That is currently the standard. So next I want to talk about what is a V50 and why is that important to you? Now, there's a lot of people out there that might say, well, that only relates to the military and only talking about fragmentation. The fact is that's not true. While yes, it is used to determine the fragmentation rating, it's also determined to see what the maximum life-saving potential of the material of the helmet is. The higher the V50, the higher the probability of survival on a higher velocity round. So whenever we look at making a purchase or whenever we look at testing a helmet, we not only look at backface deformation, we also equally or more so have to look at the rating of the V50. How is that determined? Well, it's simple. We start shooting the projectile at a disclosed speed at, say, 1900 feet per second, and we increase the speed until we find the threshold that 50% of those projectiles penetrate and 50 do not. At that 50-50 ratio is what we determine the V50 to be. That also has to be done in hot, it has to be done in cold, it has to be done in other conditions, and then a rounded number is applied to the maximum V50 that that helmet has. So there's a great study that was released by the Department of Defense. It's not a Team Wendy study, it's no manufacturer study. It was an independent study from 2005 to 13 of 77 individuals that were struck in the helmet by small arms fire. Out of those 77, 45 sustained complete penetration. Of the 45, 73.7% led to fatalities. That's 3 out of 4 individuals died because a hole happened to the helmet. Conversely speaking, 16 individuals that had complete stoppage or no penetration, we find that 100% of those lived. But not only lived, every single one of them returned back to full capacity of duty. What does that say? That simply tells you and I that the most important factor is not backface deformation. It is not all these other concerns, although we deem that very important. But the major concern for you and your personnel is to make sure that we are stopping the round. In other words, we need to determine what the maximum life-saving potential, because that is what's killing our men and women. All right, next we're going to talk about Aramid versus polyethylene. Now you might see this big word out there, ultra-high molecular weighted polyethylene. For the sake of conversation, we're just going to call it a poly helmet. So what is the difference between Aramid, also known as Kevlar, and poly? Well, I'll tell you this. Polyethylene is roughly about 45 to 50% at its technological capacity to become a better product. Aramid, on the other hand, is about 95%. So that's why they'll add all these different compounds, different chemicals, trying to make Aramid better. But the fact is, it's an antiquated material. It served a fantastic purpose 15, 20, 25 years ago. But as anything, we still move on with technology. I'm thankful I got a cell phone and I don't have to use the rotary phone anymore, and I'm sure you are too. But here's the main characteristic differences. Polyethylene is not affected by moisture. Some of you work in wet environments on the coastal regions. Polyethylene is not affected by UV rays. For my people out in Arizona and those areas out west where it gets extremely hot, UV matters to you. Polyethylene has a density of 0.95, which is less than water. So if you wonder why it's so buoyant, it's because it floats. It's these characteristics and more that cause polyethylene to be a superior material when it comes to the helmet manufacturing process. So let's talk about why Aramid is just an antiquated material. Well, the way I explain it is Aramid is a lot like a screen porch, if you will. So imagine you're 8 years old and you're throwing a tennis ball and you're hitting the screen porch and it begins to flex and it bounces that ball back. Fantastic. But as you begin to grow and you get faster, now you're throwing it at 30, at 40 miles an hour, there comes a threshold that tennis ball then overcomes the material, and Aramid does not have the qualities to absorb and disperse the energy. So what does it do? Well, it gives up the ghost, if you please. That's why the V50 of Aramid material is so much lower than that of polyethylene, which is designed to absorb and disperse the energy. So what does that mean to you? That means you get manufacturers out there that love to shoot that helmet 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, maybe even some ridiculous amount at 50 times. Well, let me tell you why. Because they know that once they get into a higher velocity round, that their helmet fails dramatically, because it does not have the ability to absorb and disperse. Shoot it 200 times. All you've done is wasted a bunch of ammo for law enforcement that actually needs that ammo to train with. The reason that we shoot a helmet 5 times in any type of test, left, right, front, back, and crown, is because we're testing the quadrants or the sections to make sure there's even density across every part of the helmet. That's why we do it. It's not a bunch of useless smoke and mirrors that exist out there. We're doing it because we want to make sure that it performs the same or better in every single area. All right, so let's talk about what I call the flux capacitor of truth, if you will. That is weight, because weight does matter. Contrary to some beliefs out there that law enforcement is only in a helmet for 30 minutes or an hour is nonsense. I can tell you of operations that I was on for multiple days. I could share stories across the country where we have been on riot situations for hours and hours and hours. Walking around with a brick on your head that's 5, 6, 7 pounds, quite frankly, does not invoke confidence in the end user. It also invokes migraines, it creates problems, and it doesn't allow the end user to function at their best. The next thing is price. We would love to say there is no price that we wouldn't pay for our lives, but the fact is there is. So we have to have a helmet that has great weight ratios and also price, but the most important factor in my mind is performance. Now you probably think performance is just a V50 and backface deformation, but that is not the truth. The truth is it must be comfortable. It must have blunt impact ratings. It must stay on your head. It must be conformable to your head. There's a ton of different attributes that goes into a helmet that has high performance. So whenever you make a decision for your agency and for your life, understand that weight, price, and performance all must be balanced and factored in together. So today we're going to talk about the Epic Specialist, and we're going to shoot it with my friend Chris here in just a few moments. Before we get into that, I want to talk about some of the unique features of this helmet. This is our newest product line that's been introduced now for about a year and a half in the market. What makes the Epic line so unique is, first of all, no through holes inside of the shell. We know that when we put holes in helmets, we compromise the material, so we took that feature out. We also introduced the arc rail. Why? Because this was designed to meet the masses, mobile field force, patrol, SWAT, and we understand that there are a lot of unique features that hook into this specific reverse dovetail rails. We also changed up the pattern just a little bit on the Velcro. What we did not do is compromise on the inside of the structure. Along with the injection molded trim, we have the Epic Air Fit, which allows the pad system to be conformed to unique heads, not forcing a head inside of a round shell. We also kept the world famous BOA system out there, and we did all this at around a 2-pound shell design. Whether it's a full cut, mid cut, or a high cut, as you see right here, the Epic Specialist is designed to meet your needs. So earlier we talked about shooting a helmet multiple times. So let me clarify something. The reason that we shoot a helmet 5 times, maybe 6 or 7 in a test, is to determine the different qualities of the depth or the density of the material that is equal across the entire shell. We don't want a part of the shell to be more dense. We don't want the other part to be thicker. We want to make sure it's consistent. Now, if there was any historical evidence that individuals were being shot more than 2 times in a confrontation or a combat episode, then that would be a different story. But there is no historical evidence. So the fact is law enforcement and the military are not sitting out there seeing how many rounds they can take to the head. If you get shot, common sense and logic says you get out of the way. So that's why we do it in a scientific manner, the best that we possibly can. And we use logic in terms that really make sense to the end user. We want to see what the maximum life-saving potential of this helmet is, and that's why we test it with a variation of rounds at higher and lower velocities. All right, so get to the magic, right? So Chris is about to shoot this in the shroud area with a 9mm critical duty round. That's 135 grains that travels about 1,070 feet per second, give or take. So we're gonna shoot that first, see what happens, come back, and we're gonna look at the inside of the helmet and hopefully invoke some confidence in the Team Wendy shell and you.
Range is hot, going hot, going hot.
So now we need to see 2 things. Did it stop the round, and what is the backface deformation? Before we continue on that, let me explain what happens with deformation in Aramid and poly. Well, deformation with Aramid, once it pushes through, has a tendency to bounce back. So after the shot, you'll go up and look at it and say, man, that's pretty fantastic. But what you don't see is the high-speed film that pushes and bounces back, where polyethylene does not do that. It pushes out and it stays because of the characteristics of the material. So when you see polyethylene, you essentially get what you actually see. So we know for a fact that we got a stoppage right here on the inside. And we also see very minimal backface deformation with critical duty rounds. So if we was to take this and do a very rough rudimentary scale here, we would see that we have approximately about 1/8 of an inch to roughly 1/16 of an inch deformation. Is it scientific? No. Does it give us a general idea? Yes, it does. So the next round is going to be a 38 special at 158 grains. That's going to be a Remington round that travels approximately about 755 feet per second, give or take. We're going to shoot it on the left-hand side, see what happens. We'll come back and hopefully we have the exact same results.
Range is hot, going hot, going hot.
So some of the newer technology that we found out there eliminates or at least mitigates the fragmentation from the shroud and the rail, as you see right here. We don't want pieces of this material coming off and injuring our individual or neighbor next to us. But the most important factor is, did it stop the round? Well, let's find out. So as we turn the helmet over, we see 100% complete stoppage, no major indentation. Maybe you've seen that in trade shows and areas. That's just not fact. We also need to go in here and see what the potential for backface deformation is. Again, not scientific, but we're looking at roughly about a 1/16 of an inch, which is well under the 25.4 millimeter standard that's been set out there. Now we're on to our third round. We're going to be shooting it with a .40 caliber by Winchester, which has a muzzle velocity of approximately 1053 and is 165 grain. We're also going to shoot it on the side of the helmet. We're going to see if we have another stoppage, and we're going to measure out the best we can our backface deformation.
Going hot, going hot, going hot.
So 3 rounds now. That was a .40 caliber, and we said it at the beginning. We're going to hold true to our word. Wherever the helmet is shot is what we're going to show you. So we see the .40 caliber round went out there. It did exit at a slight angle, which is the difference of obliquity. But what we need to look at is, did it stop the round? Well, if we turn this over, we absolutely have complete stoppage of the round with still minimal backface deformation of around a .5 inch at most. So we're around 12 to 14 millimeters. So well within the industry standard. So you see now 9 millimeter, 38 and .40 caliber. All right, so now we're on to shot number 4. We're going to be shooting with a Remington 45 caliber, 235 grains and approximately about 135 feet per second. This time we're going to take the shot on the back of the helmet. We believe we're going to have the same results. Stand by.
Range is going hot, going hot, going hot. Stand by. Good.
So 4 rounds, 4 stops, maybe. So let's check it out. Again, now we're shooting it with a 45 on the backside. We look inside here, and again, we've got the same results on the inside, and that is a complete stop with very minimal backface deformation. We take our handy dandy super scientific instrumentation right here, and we look at the approximate backface of my finger. We're back to about an 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch. Again, we continue to try to instill confidence in Team Wendy products. So sometimes they say you got to save the best for last, so that's exactly what we've done. We've got a 44 Magnum 320 grain hollow point or core bond at roughly 1,270 feet per second. That's a lot of lead traveling at a very fast speed. We're going to shoot this on the crown. We're going to look at it in a real way and see exactly what happens.
Range is hot, going hot, going hot.
So 5 rounds, the last one was a doozy. So we're talking about a 44 Magnum with a lot of foot-pounds of pressure pushing into this helmet. So did we get a stop or did we not? Well, if we pull these pads back, we see again, we got a complete stoppage of that round. You might say, well, what is this expansion? Well, what happens when so much kinetic energy is driven into pad systems, they swell. They're designed to do that because when they go to altitude and they decrease, they have to expel the air. Well, when too much pressure is pushed into those, they overcome the outer material, which is what creates the cracking. Now, is that going to cause a possible concussion? Sure, there's always that possibility. But what sends us home at the end of the day is stopping the round. And the same is true when we start looking at backface deformation based off obliquity. We're roughly about a 1/2 inch of backface deformation with one of the most powerful handgun rounds that's been known to man. So we hope that you've now got a better understanding of ballistic performance. You understand that when it's all said and done, we look at helmets in 3 different capacities: weight, performance, and price. Performance is not just stopping the round, not just backface deformation, but how does it invoke confidence into the users? How does it allow the men and women of law enforcement and the military to do their job at their absolute best? Well, we have to stop the threat. We also have to provide comfort. And ultimately, we want to perform and give you the very best product that we possibly can. Thank you for watching. And as always, we appreciate you being a part of our team at Team Wendy.